Chapter 031, A Broken Bar. Wait a second. Liner Yuan raised his hand and interjected, what do you mean by life in stillness and stillness? As the saying goes, when the spirit and chi flourish, the water and the water are separated. The body is the furnace and the chi is the fire. Chi refinement is the root and the meridians flow naturally. Shenmi said calmly, the next stage of chi refinement is the rumbling of thunder. The meridians flow continuously together with the body's joints. A broken bar. Liner Yuan was speechless. He felt like he was listening to a book from heaven. In fact, he knew some key words from what Shenmi said. After all, Jiang Lian had taught Liner Yuan before and he knew a thing or two about martial arts. If it was someone else who had never come into contact with such a thing, they would definitely be dizzy and confused after hearing it. Although Liner Yuan didn't fully understand what Shenmi was saying, he could tell that Shenmi's martial arts were a completely different system from the mainstream martial arts of the day. Rather than martial arts, the popular martial arts nowadays were called mecha techniques. It combined the human body with the mecha and maximized the power of the mecha. Shenmi's path was based on personal development. If the mecha techniques of various sects were to control the human body with the mecha, then Shenmi's was to control the human body with the mecha. They seemed to be taking different paths, but in fact, they were completely different. Jiang Lian, the flashing blade all-seeing manifestation, had taken the same path. Liner Yuan was more and more certain that Jiang Lian and Shenmi had something to do with each other. Otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence when both their combat styles and martial arts philosophies were so similar? Could it be that the flashing blade all-seeing manifestation went missing and took in Shenmi as his disciple? Jiang Lian went missing 10 years ago and Shenmi was 18 years old. That made sense. But if that was the case, why hadn't Jiang Lian contacted him? He was half Jiang Lian's disciple. If there was anyone in the world that Jiang Lian trusted the most, Liner Yuan felt that he was definitely one of them. Unable to figure it out, Liner Yuan decided not to think about it. Looking at Shenmi, he wanted to ask him about Jiang Lian. He even wanted to know if Jiang Lian was still alive and where he was. But when words reached his lips, he hesitated. He wasn't close to Shenmi yet. If he asked these questions, would Shenmi be wary? What's wrong? Seeing that Liner Yuan wasn't talking, Shenmi asked in confusion. Nothing. Liner Yuan shook his head and decided to put it aside for the time being and wait for the right opportunity to ask. You have the foundation. If you want to learn, it should be very fast. Shenmi thought that he was thinking about chi refinement, so he comforted him. Start from the round pile. If you're talented, you'll be able to get started in 10 days to half a month. Liner Yuan knew that he had misunderstood, but he didn't explain. He smiled and said, okay. If Shenmi was Jiang Lian's disciple, then the two of them could be considered brothers from the same sect. When he was taught by Jiang Lian had not gone missing yet. Therefore, in terms of seniority, he should be Shenmi's senior apprentice brother. At this thought, Liner Yuan's gaze toward Shenmi became much more amiable. Why does it feel like the sky is darkening so quickly? When Shenmi sensed that they had entered, it was still early. However, not long after they entered the world seam, the light in their line of sight had already dimmed by a lot. It was a sign that dusk was about to arrive. In the world seam, many things are different from the first world, including but not limited to gravity, weather, air, and even some of the rules of the world. Liner Yuan said. For example, the S-Class Ultra-High-Risk World Seam, the two-dimensional world seam. You'll even turn into a cartoon character in there. There's such a world seam. Shenmi's eyes widened. This was the first time he had heard of such a thing. It sounds fun, but in fact, it's more dangerous than you think. If you stay there for too long, you'll be assimilated by the rules in the world seam and won't be able to return to the third world, Liner Yuan said. Therefore, this world seam is still under exploration and hasn't been listed as a competition venue. Perhaps one of the competitions in the future will be held here. After a pause, Liner Yuan said, there are only 9 hours a day in the quicksand world seam. We have to speed up. At night, it's not as peaceful as it looks. A broken bar. Follow me. Shenmi nodded. The next second, Liner Yuan sprinted again. This time, he didn't deliberately control his speed and rushed toward the A22 area in the Western District. Shenmi's mecha chased after him with great momentum and violent whistling sounds. His mecha, Sky Blue, was only a B-class mecha, one class lower than Liner Yuan's A-class mecha. However, its speed wasn't slow at all. Liner Yuan didn't lose him in the end. As Liner Yuan hurried, he kept an eye on Shenmi's movements from the corner of his eye. He saw that Shenmi was chasing closely behind. Moreover, as the number of jumps increased, his balance and control improved visibly. Towards the end, Shenmi had even learned how to control the origin energy output of the mecha. When exerting force on the ground, he would increase the origin energy output and decrease it when free falling. This method was obviously more energy efficient, and it also made Shenmi look more at ease. What an enviable talent. Liner Yuan secretly praised in his heart. A broken bar. The two of them were very fast. Before the sky completely darkened, they finally arrived at the Western District of the Quicksand Realm. The Western District was a terrain similar to the Gobi Desert. At first glance, no plants could be seen. The accumulated rocks had been eroded by weathering and peeling off a large amount of debris. Along with the sand rolling on the ground, the small movements formed by the friction of the gravel converged into a rustling sound, making a daunting sound on the wild sand. There a broken bar. Doesn't seem to be anyone here. Shenmi looked around and said, compared to the sea of people at the transit station when they first arrived, the Western District could be said to be completely deserted. For most mecha warriors, the Western District is the gathering place of mooks and worms. It's also the most dangerous area in the Quicksand Realm. It's normal that there's no one here. Liner Yuan said, there aren't many living people here. But the bones buried under the sand a broken bar are more than you think. Crack. As soon as he finished speaking, Shinmi felt that he seemed to have stepped on something hard. There was a crisp sound, like the sound of metal gliding. He lowered his head, bent down, and ran his hand over the sand on the ground. The surface of the sand was swept away, revealing what was underneath. It was a skeleton. It had been dead for a long time. The skin and flesh of the corpse had been weathered away, leaving only brittle bones. The skeleton was covered with a layer of faded nanoalloy. It was so tattered that it was impossible to tell the original model of the mecha. As expected of Yun, he had brought a newcomer who had never entered the quicksand realm and hadn't even graduated from school to the most dangerous area. A broken bar, only he would do such a thing. When Shinmi looked down at the skeleton that had been buried for some time, the quicksand behind him had quietly swelled up. A huge black scorpion tail silently drilled out of the quicksand and extended towards Shinmi's back. The tail was 4 meters long and thicker than a building's pillar. However, it didn't make any sound in the moving sand. It blended in with the sparse sound of the sand rubbing against each other. Under the cover of the dark sky, it stretched towards the back of Shinmi's neck as if an assassin had suddenly revealed his killing weapon. Yun saw it, but he didn't say anything. The skeleton had obviously been dead for a long time. In an environment like the quicksand realm rift, sand kept blowing in with the wind, covering the skeleton layer by layer. Logically speaking, this corpse should have been buried very deep underground when the skeletons were exposed and easily visible. It meant that something was moving underground and pushing away layers of sand. Only then could the skeletons that had been buried deep be pushed up to the surface. A broken bar. This was the first lesson that Yun taught to his dear junior brother. When a pro player was in the quicksand realm rift, no matter when or how peaceful the scene looked, he couldn't let his guard down. Whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air suddenly rang out. The tail that had been quietly extending out seemed to have finally found a chance to kill with a single strike. With a loud bang, the quicksand surface exploded from the ground. A huge exotic beast that looked like a scorpion broke out of the ground and appeared in the air. Even in the darkness, its exoskeleton was so black that it shone like armor covering the surface of its body. On both sides of its ferocious mouth were 2 pincers. The moment it appeared, a strong fishy smell broke out of the ground and instantly filled every inch of the air around it. Yun saw that Shinmi didn't move. Didn't he react? He was a bit disappointed, but then he felt relieved. Shinmi's previous performance had given him too many surprises, so much so that he had a lot of expectations that he shouldn't have. For someone who had just entered the world scene for the first time, this was indeed a bit too much. One couldn't become fat just by eating a mouthful of food. The path of a pro player was a path of bloodshed. Only through years of battle could one develop a sharp mind for battle. Origin energy flowed through his body, quickly passing through several nodes. Yun's body quietly tensed up, ready to save Shinmi when he was in danger. But the next second, clang! The sound of the blade being pulled out and the whistling sound of the blade being unsheathed sounded almost at the same time. Shinmi's body went from still to moving without any hesitation. Silent 7 blade, rising. Hidden blade rush. It was as if all the accumulated power had been unleashed. The young man's skinny body seemed to have turned into a bolt of lightning. The moment he turned around to attack, Yun saw the young man's eyes. The usually harmless and calm gaze was now filled with a thick murderous aura, as if it had materialized into something tangible. Then the lightning appeared, and the blade flashed.